The Star and D'Amico Show brought to you by cheapesttshirts.ca. Need blanks for your next event or club? Check out cheapesttshirts.ca. No minimum order, free shipping over $350. Same day shipping on lots of items. Affordable, Canadian, ready to print your design. Brought to you by Catherine Prince at Remax Platine, your Montreal real estate connection. Call her at 514-702-2474 or email Catherine with a K, Catherine at catherineprince.com. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest with confidence, Catherine Prince, your key to the city's property market. Brought to you by McLean's Pub. Looking for a lively downtown spot with great food and atmosphere? Come to McLean's Pub on Peel Street. Classic pub eats, plenty of beer, and all the sports on all the screens. Grab your friends and make McLean's your go-to place tonight. Brought to you by Cabletel, your full-service telecom partner for business and home. From structured cabling and phone systems to Wi-Fi, cameras, and alarms, Cabletel keeps you connected, secure, and performing at your best. Your partner for the future. It's Cabletel. Welcome to a brand new week of the Star and D'Amico Show. There he is, smiling ear to ear. It's a Marco D'Amico with RG Media and a regular on Habs Breakfast on TSN 690 with yours truly and Connor McKenna every Wednesday at 8:05. Marco, happy Monday. What's good, brother?
What a fun weekend of sports we just had. I'm
No
telling you,
kidding.
it's just this time of year is great when like literally every single sport going on at once. So it's just fantastic, and obviously capped off with a strong win from the Montreal Canadiens and the Laval
Oh,
Rocket.
with those cardiac Canadians strike again. Of course, thanks for watching our Sunday live show in the aftermath of that Canadians comeback win, 4-3 in overtime. Looks like number 93 is starting to, again, he already was, but once again, national attention being paid to Ivan Demidov, and Alex Newhook has found a groove on that line, and the Montreal Canadiens once again on a very busy week ahead. And of course, blanket coverage right here on this show as you're used to. They've got Philadelphia tomorrow night. Then they're on the road at New Jersey and then back home against the juggernaut. Yeah, the juggernaut, Utah Mammoth. But let's talk about, and we get some emails, on our audio podcast page that you can find on Apple and Spotify and everywhere else. We seem to be getting in the aftermath of, mainly Marco NHL discussion. Hey guys, what's up with David Reinbacher? Isn't the timeline now? Like, shouldn't he be back? Your wish is granted, my friends. We are here to answer those questions after David Reinbacher returned from a broken bone in his hand, making
Mhm.
his Laval Rocket debut on Friday in a 2-1 loss to Rochester, bounced back with a dominant 5-2 win against those very same Americans on Saturday night as David Reinbacher, no points, but did pick up an assist in his second game back. I mean, let's start here. I mean, it's not on him. It's just bad luck. Ever since the Canadians chose him at 5th overall, it's just been injury after injury after injury. It's nice to see this guy back. Now, knock on wood, he can stay healthy for a massive amount of time here, but a
Mhm.
nice little return for David Reinbacher. Nice to see him back playing hockey again, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't blame fans for being worried about it. His injuries, the hand injuries, freak accident, whatever. Like it is what it is, and to me, it's just the structural injuries, right? Like whenever you injure a knee or a shoulder, like that's where my eyes start to open up, or like there's a herniated disc. Like those are the kinds of injuries that can kill careers. So that's
Hmm.
the only reason I'm, how you say, concerned to a degree. Like, for example, like Caden Gooley hasn't had a structural injury. He's had every other type of injury, but he hasn't had a structural injury, which leads me to believe that these injuries that he's sustaining won't slow him down when he comes back to health. Reinbacher, I wanted to see skate. I wanted to see how he was going to move. I was happy to see that his mobility is perfectly fine. Obviously, he injured his hand, not his feet. So he was able to keep skating during the time. And Pascal Vincent said that he was in the meetings as well. So he didn't necessarily lose a step, just miss 6 or 7 games, which is exactly what we thought was going to happen. Now, on the game winning goal, which resulted in the loss for the Laval Rocket, David Reinbacher kind of misplayed a play, tried to pick off a pass, and instead the puck ended up going behind him off the other way into a 2-on-1 and ultimately leading to a goal. And then immediately took full ownership of that. And even though his teammates tried to, you know, say it wasn't his fault and they should have been better positioned, and even Kakinen said he should have had that. It's always like the mistake that's made on the ice. And
Mhm.
again, the things that Pascal Vincent wanted to work on with David Reinbacher weren't going to get worked on until he got into game situations. So I'm not necessarily worried, because then he bounced back quite nicely on the Saturday game versus the Friday game. The Saturday game was, he saw a little bit more confidence. You saw him with a little bit more oomph. He
Mhm.
patrolled the blue line much better, passed the puck around much better, and then ultimately, was able to find Jared Davidson for that one timer to pick up his first point of the campaign.
I want to get into Jared Davidson, as you point out there, in that 5-2 with Jacob Fowler back in net on Saturday at Laval, and that in the win over Rochester, right? Picks up the assist, as you just pointed out. Davidson's on 7 goals. We'll talk about him. Laurent Dauphin, a fantastic pro, is right at the top of the leaderboard in terms of red hot starts by players in the American Hockey League for the now 6-4 Laval Rocket. But did any of these injuries, like when I watched Reinbacher in the playoff run last year, I liked how feisty he was. And again, penalties don't always mean feistiness, but he did take back-to-back minors Friday and Saturday. But I mean,
Hmm.
does he have an edge to his game? I remember in the playoffs, Pascal Vincent talking about how, and I remember one
Yeah.
specific, a little scrum in front of the net, and this guy didn't back down. He
Yeah.
went into it, stood up for his teammates, showed aggressiveness. I mean, is that part of his repertoire if and when he becomes a regular on the Montreal Canadiens blue line?
I can compare it to Yuri Slafkovsky to a degree, right? Like that, he
Sure.
wasn't necessarily a mean player,
Mm,
but look at Saturday night. Look at how he used his size. Look at how physical he was. Look at how implicated he was along the boards. Look at his one-on-one battles. Like those are skills that can be learned. Now, there's a difference between being physical and being mean.
yeah.
Being mean is a state of being. Like you have to be mean, right? Like certain players are mean. Even like I'll give you like a direct personal example. Brady Kachuk was at the Bell Center on Saturday night in the media lounge, and he just kind of looked at us and was like, "Can I take some hot dogs? Are those free?" And we were all like, "Yeah, who's gonna say no to you, buddy?" Like
Yeah, exactly.
he's like,
That's
I'm
funny.
sure as hell not. Go right ahead.
Did you see
So
how he dressed them? Was he an all dressed guy? Was he a ketchup mayo guy? Did
yeah,
you?
no, he was all dressed. The guy, this is
Attaboy.
a Kachuk, nice and
Yeah.
styled. But just to give you an idea, like some people have an aura about them, right? And so when you have a guy like David Reinbacher, is probably one of the most like cool and collected individuals that I've had the pleasure of interviewing one on one. Like it's just I gentle giant kind of scenario, but I think in North America, I think he's slowly starting to realize that, he was also drafted for his size, right? If he was a 5'10" defenseman with his skill set, he probably wouldn't have gone top five. So you need to utilize these gifts to the benefit of your play so that you can optimize your impact for the team. And so obviously they've had that conversation with him, and it was received during the playoffs because he was physical in the playoffs. The only thing I'd just like to see is see him be more of the aggressor, and less of the pushback, not get knocked out, not get knocked around kind of guy. And so that's what the Laval Rocket are pushing to see more of. Obviously, like I said, you come back from a hand injury, you don't want to go too hard too quick, because then that's a recipe to get injured or something else happening to you. But from what I was explained, everything seems to be running smoothly. He looks primed for a full season. One thing I did like from him is he protected himself much better. He went for a shot block, hand under the chest, and the leg out or hip out. That's like it's a detail, but that's something they teach young defensemen so that you don't get under the gloves, which is how he got injured. You go to take the hits in the corner. You make sure that your back is out so that you don't get crunched against the boards, like little details like that. And so clearly the Canadians have had the conversation with them. And again, like this isn't crazy things. This is something that kids in North America learn at the pee-wee stage when they start, getting hit, and in the midget stage, sorry, when they start taking hits. But when you get to North America, it's a different game from when you're in Switzerland or in Austria, where the ice is much bigger. You have way more time to think. It's less physical, etc. So it's just a question of getting him the reps. Because I think above all, everybody can agree with David Reinbacher. It's about the reps. I don't think anybody doubts that this individual can be a top four defenseman in the NHL, or I think there are very few. I think the debate was always whether he would be a top pair right shot defenseman, and I
Mhm.
don't think that's necessary anymore. But if he could just stay healthy, he has all the tools to be a top four right shot defenseman all day, every day. And so that's where the Canadians need to get with him, is just get him the reps. So from what we saw, it looks like they're going to use him galore. He's used in defensive situations, offensive situations. So that's fantastic for his development. And at the same time, if the Laval Rocket are in a pinch, you saw it, in a couple situations over the last two games, they stick him with Adam Engstrom and they basically create their super pair, which ironically was their third pair in the
Mhm.
playoffs last year, and they ended the playoffs as their top pair, supplanting Mayu and William Trudeau. Today it's their nuclear option if ever they need a goal. So that goes to show you how much the coaching staff likes both players.
And as we spoke about, if we bring it to the NHL for a second, watching, Kirby Doc and the narrative in the preseason going into the early blushes of the regular season for him was like,
Hmm.
give him time, shake off that rust. And to me, like the same kind of logic applies to Reinbacher at the American Hockey League level. And I love the way you broke it down in terms of his hockey smarts, protecting his body, manipulating his body in a way to, avoid injury. And none of these injuries, right, that Reinbacher has suffered from, none of that really will prohibit his growth as a player. Like we're not talking about chronic injuries that will
Well,
resurface or limit his mobility or
mhm,
physical play on the ice. To me, that's the silver lining about a guy's. And I think you're right. Like top pair, whatever. But like you see the skill set, you see the confidence. Okay, the flashes of it. I
yeah,
should put of a guy
yeah.
who could be a regular top four guy for this team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, when you have a top three of Hudson, Matheson, and Dobson, and there's a Caden Gooley in the mix as well,
Right.
you don't really need to be a superstar. You just need to bring an element to that brigade that isn't there. And I think especially with Mike Matheson being in the last of the contract year, we don't know if he'll extend just yet. But the idea being that David Reinbacher would take a lot of those defensive responsibilities, be on the first wave of the penalty kill, play big minutes at 5-on-5 in a shutdown role. Like that's the vision. So
Hmm.
if that's the vision, ideally you're going to want to put him with Lane Hudson. Ideally, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Lane Hudson's going to play with Noah Dobson either. And then you have a shutdown pair of Caden Gooley, David Reinbacher. Like there are options, but that is the premise. That is why a player of right shot defensemen are so coveted, is because they're so rare, and when they're Reinbacher size and skate the way the Reinbacher does, that's the ask. Now again, and I'm with everybody here. He has to play. He has to spend the whole season in Laval. I don't want to see him touch Montreal unless it's for like a one game at the end of the year, like they did with Logan Mayu and other younger players, just to be like, good season, kiddo. Like here's your first NHL game. That's the only thing. If the Canadians want to call anybody up right now, they have Del Gaizo, and in my honest opinion, if they're at home, they have Adam Engstrom as well. David Reinbacher is not needed in the NHL right now. The focus should be on playing. And from what Pascal Vincent said last night, they're going to play him a lot.
To your point about Del Gaizo, I mean, he played half the season for the Nashville Predators, and big reason why they brought him along on the road trip when the Canadians were out in Western Canada and then finished up in Seattle, Washington, along with Joshua Roy. At least Roy got into a game. Del Gaizo was there as an emergency type
Insurance.
situation.
Yeah.
But here we go. We look at this Laval Rocket team that right now is second place in their division. They're 6-4 on the season. But if you look at the goal scorer and the table, right
Mm,
now the Laval Rocket have the luxury of having two guys on the same team that are tied for the league lead in goals through 10 games. Laurent Dauphin's got 7 goals and 12 points. He's amongst the AHL leaders in scoring this season. Jared
mhm,
Davidson with 7 goals and 2 points. And let's get into Davidson, who was a fifth round, 130 overall selection back in the 2022 draft. He's in the midst of his third season in the American Hockey League, coming off 24 goals last season. You and I, we talk regularly, right, about what we call these tweeners, these
mm,
players that do really well at the American Hockey League level. We can go as far back as Charles Hudon. We just finished dropping Joshua Roy's name. Jury's still out. Is this guy a tweener? Or is he just in the wrong fit at the wrong time in the wrong organization? TBD.
mhm.
But what about Jared Davidson? Again, that big season last season, and here he is again on fire with 7 goals and implicated all over the score sheet Friday and Saturday over the weekend.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at a guy like Jared Davidson in terms of what he brings to a game, there's a lot to like, right? He has the physical implication,
Hmm.
the shooting mechanics are there. Like his shot, his one timer, we saw the one timer this weekend
Yeah.
is just NHL level in my opinion. He could play just in terms of the shooting mechanics, he could be a threat on a bottom six in my opinion. Um, he has the hockey sense. You know, this is a guy who is not the best skater. That's the one thing that holds him back, in my honest opinion, from
Hmm.
being an everyday NHL player is the skating. But the positional awareness allows him to compensate for that. And we've seen that there are tons of players in this league that are not the best skaters, average at best. But it's the positional awareness and the hockey IQ that allows them to overcompensate for that, or at least compensate for that, to allow them to optimize their time on the ice and be in the right place at the right moment to accept a shot or to make a play. Well, that's what Jared Davidson does, but he does so with a little bit more of a physical edge. And I think that is extremely valuable, especially when you watch a game like the Saturday night game with Montreal against Ottawa. It's a very chippy game. A guy
Yes.
like Jared Davidson, in my opinion, probably would have had more of an impact than, say, a Joe Valeno, who I thought didn't have a very good game.
And I love the fact that you bring up the chippiness because I can't help but think about the lack of offense. We spend time talking about secondary scoring. We did a video last week on the 2C trade market starting to open up a little bit. We saw
Mhm,
Calgary lose their ninth game of the season. All eyes on Nazem Kadri there. They're on the struggle bus in a massive way, but the veteran line of Evans, Gallagher, and Anderson is on a combined 2 goals. Evans into an empty net. Josh Anderson's on
mhm,
2 points here. Brendan Gallagher, tough start for him after a great season a year ago. He's on 0 goals for the now 9-3 Montreal Canadiens. And so
mhm.
when you talk about Jared Davidson and the offensive punch, I wonder how much longer, before they consider him as a viable option. I mean, do you see that down the road if the depth of the Canadians bottom six doesn't step up and this guy continues to score at a great clip, 7 goals in 10 games?
I mean, I remember having the conversation with someone in the Canadians organization as early as training camp, where we kind of both looked at each other and said, "Yeah, this guy's going to play NHL games this year."
Yeah.
And, I think that that stands to be true. I believe that he has exactly what the Canadians are looking for. The talk at the beginning of camp was all about Florian Jacki, and
Yeah.
Florian's starting to turn it around a little bit, but it was a really slow start the first couple of games. I think when you have a guy like Davidson, he's older, 23 years old, you have to see what you have in him, because that entry level contract is going to come to an end soon. You gotta know what you got. And ultimately, he is a guy that I believe fits the style that the Canadians lack in their lineup. Like, it's about diversifying the kinds of profiles in your bottom six. They all have to play a specific role. Well, here's a guy, in my opinion, that would be able to complete plays made by Kirby Dach and Zachary Bolduc, who I believe are a strong duo, but need a better finisher on that line to complete the play. And right now, Valeno, although he is a good teammate and he does provide the benefit of being able to take the left side draws for Kirby Dach, who's not very strong at the faceoff circle, I do not believe he offers enough for when you look at a guy like Jared Davidson and you say, this is a guy who's won, right?
Hmm.
This is a guy with the Seattle Thunderbirds, was a very strong component in their playoff runs at the time. This is a guy who always gave 100%. He could play center, he could play wing. And to me, he's one of those like late bloomer picks. And I remember, we go back to the 2022 draft. Everybody was like, who? But I had a couple of WHL guys behind me that were like, "Oh, okay, the Canadians are going this way."
Hmm.
And he was drafted as an overager and had to prove himself, prove himself, prove himself. Like, let us remember, his first season in Laval was on an AHL deal because the Canadians still had his rights. They didn't give him an entry level contract off the bat. He had to earn it, and he earned it well. And then followed it up with a 45-point season last year, playing third line minutes, and now is playing at a point per game clip basically with a 7 goals in 10 games or 12 games. That is, to me, absolutely indicative of upward progression, consistent improvement. And at that point, you are a meritocratic organization. You can bring them up, right? The Canadians
Sure.
right now, if you go and look, are icing or basically carrying a 21-man roster. there's no extra, in fact, on the team right now. It's just the 20 players on that you saw on the ice last night plus Jakub Dobeš. So they're 21 players right now. So the Canadians could afford a call up. They just don't need one when they're at home, and Laval is right there. So you could just make a quick call. I believe, you know, if he keeps this up, the Canadians are going to a southwestern road trip towards American Thanksgiving. If he continues to do so and there are no injuries,
Yeah.
I believe Jared Davidson is the first call up when it comes to forwards.
Jacob Fowler. Let's wrap up on Jacob
Woo.
Fowler in his first pro season with the Laval Rocket. Obviously, you saw him last year, fresh out of uni, third round, 69th overall pick. Many peg him as the future netminder of the Montreal Canadiens. He's
Mm.
4-2 with a pair of shutouts, a 913 save percentage. Your early impressions on Fowler establishing himself as a pro now within the Montreal Canadiens system?
Yeah, with Fowler, it's a little bit of it's always difficult to be able to tell with when it comes to young goaltenders because obviously this is a guy that comes in from the collegiate ranks. We've seen this before where I thought he tracked pucks well. I thought that he was able to look through screens, which is really
Hmm.
important for a goaltender in the pro level. I found his explosivity to be good but improvable. I'm talking about last year. And I also found that when it came to his combativeness, I have not seen a better goaltender do that since Carey Price at that age. Now, fast forward to this year, the explosiveness is on point. The athleticism is there. This is a guy who is visibly slimmed down in a good way, right? Lost a lot of the baby fat, a lot
Right.
stronger, lower body, far more filled out. So this is a guy who took his off-season training seriously, and it's being shown on the ice, right? Like Saturday night's game, I believe 36 saves on 38 shots, and they were like, especially in the later parts of the third period, like there was a push, and he was just shutting it down. And I think that was the best confidence builder, I believe, for the team because when your goalies are going and 38 shots, it's tough ass. It's almost 40 shots from the Rochester Americans, who are a good team. Let us remind you, that's the Buffalo Sabres farm system.
That's right.
They've always been good. They've always been good. It's the NHL team that has a problem, but the AHL team is all stacked with talent. So I believe that Jacob Fowler, again, like it's just about finding that consistency. I think having Capo Kakinen with him as a veteran to split the games and practice with him and show him the way is going to be very beneficial as well. Far more beneficial than when they threw Jakub Dobeš to the Wolves in his rookie season and played in
Hmm.
50 plus games. So I think Jacob Fowler is the kind of guy that you can just let simmer. Like keep into consideration. This is the first year of his entry level contract, right? So he's got another 2 seasons after this. So there's no stress in his regard. And to me, I think, especially with goalies across the league, you look at guys like Spencer Knight, Devin Levi, who has reportedly asked for a trade.
Yeah.
All of these guys that get rushed to the NHL out of college rarely works out. So it is important to give him the time to develop, to continue to develop. But what we've seen so far has been clutch, has been worthy of number one status in the AHL. But again, it's a handful of games. So it's good to see this. I'm very interested to see where his game is going to be in February and March when, the table starts getting tighter and the playoff race
Mm.
really kicks in the AHL.
You can support us by supporting our sponsors, as always. For the now 6-4 Laval Rocket through 10 games, Syracuse at 7-2, the Americans at 7-3, and just like their big brother club, Laval, one of the most penalized teams in the NHL. Both Rochester and Laval, the two most penalized teams in the league, separated by just 3 PIMs, 165 for Rochester, 162 for the Laval Rocket. That, my friends, is something to keep an eye on. Big thanks to Cheapest T-Shirts, McLean's Pub, Cablatel, Catherine Prince, and our friends Chuck and Evie at littlebearonline.com with all the best gear. Keep your pets nice and warm. They've got all the best brands from around the world at great prices. You can find more online at Little Bear Online or check them out in person on St. Catherine across from Westmount Square. Make sure to join my partner and I tomorrow as we get into game day with the Montreal Canadiens and the Philadelphia Flyers, who starts in goal. And is there a little, listen, no hating here. Montreal Canadiens are one of the elite clubs in the league, but the method in which they win these games, sustainability, law of averages. I want to pick Marco's brain on the early trends that are quite obvious in the early blushes of a new NHL season. Marco D'Amico, thanks as always, and looking forward to our conversation tomorrow on youtube.com. That'll drop at 10.